Good afternoon, everyone. As Phil said, my name's Joe. I'm a project engineer here at WMG, University of Warwick. Recently completed my engineering doctorate here, and I'm going to be talking to you about some of the research we're looking at to do with integrating humans and technology, human factors as we call it. So, who's heard of the idea of a self-driving car? Excellent. So that's half my job done. So yeah, self-driving cars, autonomous vehicles, driverless cars, lots of different acronyms to talk about essentially a similar kind of technology. And the concept is, what if we can take the driver out of the driving position and instead use much more reliable computers to drive the car for you? It's a really cool idea, something I'm really excited about, and some of the sort of technology I love seeing coming out. But why do you want to do this? Well, there's lots of benefits of a self-driving car. The first one that comes to mind immediately is safety. 94% of car accidents happen due to human error. So the concept goes, if we can remove the human, we remove the error, therefore we can improve safety. Accessibility. 40% of people of legal driving age don't drive. And that's due to multiple factors, due to disabilities, maybe visual impairment. People are too old, people are too young. Some people can't afford mobility, some people can't afford a car. Well, if you have a self-driving car and a lot of sort of mobility as a service technologies that allows, we can make sure that transportation and mobility is accessible to everyone. Congestion and pollution. We've heard a lot about some environmental factors today. I think also self-driving vehicles have their role to play in helping us for a more sustainable future. And then there's productivity. The average UK driver spends 293 hours per year in a car. Now that's roughly equivalent to about 36 working days spent in a car. That's a lot of time wasted. So what can we do in that vehicle instead of driving? That's one of the really interesting things. If we look to what the future might look like for self-driving cars, we see something a little bit like this. Unfortunately, I haven't got a real photo. We haven't got self-driving cars out there yet, but we're working on it. Some of the cool things we see people doing, reading books, playing on their laptops, maybe working, having a good time, everyone's safe and having fun. The problem is, there's lots of challenges that we have yet to address in order to realise this autonomous future. We've got some legislative barriers, regulations, laws, insurances. We've got some technical issues. We've heard about some electric vehicle issues today, or challenges. And we've also got things like connectivity and software programming and the physical vehicles themselves. Alongside these, we've also got the human factor, and that's the research that I'm particularly interested in. And that's looking at various ways in which we can take this technology and integrate it with humans. So issues like control handover, when should you relinquish control and give it back, information requirements from what needs to be communicated within the vehicle, communication with the vehicle to pedestrians and with other road users. And at WMG, we've been looking to address a lot of these challenges. One of the challenges that I've been particularly interested in is this one, motion sickness. Does anyone here get motion sick or has had motion sickness? Quite a few people, yeah. So actually we know about 1/3 of the population are susceptible to motion sickness. About 50% of the population have vomited in a car due to motion sickness. People get motion sick in cars, they get motion sick in boats, seasickness. They get motion sickness in trains sometimes, in aeroplanes, we call that the various travel sickness. You get motion sickness sometimes using virtual reality headsets and then simulators and stuff like that. It's an interesting challenge. And what makes it more interesting is that we know that the use cases and the design of self-driving cars all influence motion sickness. We expect that motion sickness in self-driving vehicles is likely to increase relatively significantly due to the way in which we want to use the technology and the way in which the technology is designed. So that's what we're going to try and solve. Before we go any further, I'm going to give you a really quick whistle-stop tour as to what constitutes motion sickness. This isn't a biology lesson, we'll get back to the cars really quickly, but I think this is really interesting and it helps you understand why motion sickness is a factor. So, we have three methods of understanding motion. We've got our vestibular system, that's our balance organs within our inner ear, and these organs are responsible for sensing motion. We've got a visual system, We can use our eyes to see motion, and we can infer motion from what we see moving. And then we've got our somatosensory system, which is an area within your brain which helps you understand motion based on pressure and location of limbs, etc. Motion sickness comes about due to what's called the sensory conflict theory. Sensory conflict explains that when one or more of these senses is mismatched, there's a conflict, and therefore motion sickness comes about. So I'll give you a quick example. If you're in a car, this is a sort of experience that most of you might be familiar with. If you're sitting in a car and you've got your head down and you're reading a book, the majority of your visual field is going to be static, i.e. not moving. However, if you have a vestibular system and your brain's going to tell you are moving. So there's a conflict. One says you're moving, one says you're not. Motion sickness can occur. Now, I'll get back to cars just after this next point. The really interesting thing as to why motion sickness occurs, I found particularly cool, is what is due to what we think is called the evolutionary hypothesis. And that explains that when our body senses there's a mismatch between our senses, we assume that we must have ingested a poison or a toxin, and it's that poison which is responsible for this mismatch and therefore our motion sickness. So what do we do when we ingest a poison? Well, we try to push it out through our toxins out through our skin, we start to sweat, we alleviate gases, we start to burp, and eventually we empty the contents of our stomach to get rid of anything we might have ingested. So that's what motion sickness is. So let's start to think about how we can apply motion sickness to some of the use cases of self-driving cars. If you ask people what they want to do in a self-driving car, you get a lot of these responses up here. At least I know that I want to do a lot of these things. I want to turn my chair around, I want to browse the internet, I want to play on my phone, play video games, I want to work, watch films. All sounds really good. And manufacturers are kind of behind this. You see a lot of the concepts coming up for these self-driving vehicles, showing all these really cool activities we can do. Problem is, if we think back to what causes sensory conflict and what causes motion sickness, you can start to see that actually all of these things here are likely to induce sensory conflict and therefore induce motion sickness. And these non-driving related activities are one of the reasons why motion sickness is more of a factor in a self-driving vehicle than traditional. We've also got some other various design influences here. So you can see in this particular example, there's really minimal window space. It's really hard to get the visual sense of motion. Most of the workspaces are heads down, so most of your visual field is going to be static. So these are probably not that well contrived. But what can we do about it? Fortunately, there's lots we can do about it. I've dedicated my last sort of 4 years of my engineering doctorate to trying to figure out these issues. And WMG have been doing a lot of work and experiments trying to figure out how can we make self-driving cars or even traditional vehicles less nauseating for their occupants. So here's some photos of some experiments we've done. This is the 3XE simulator we have at the University of Warwick. Really great tool for research and development of technology, but also for motion sickness. And then this is some on-road user trials here. So some of the things we've been doing over the last couple of years is looking at different human-machine interfaces, or HMIs, for self-driving vehicles, looking at vehicle dynamics and route selection. And one of the things I've been working on myself is looking at methods of reducing personal susceptibility. I can't tell you exactly how we're going about it, because the car company who sponsors the research wants to keep it a little bit secret in case their competitors steal it. But what we've done is developed a sort of a brain training tool. And this tool is designed to train very specific areas of cognition or functions within your brain, and therefore reduce your motion sickness susceptibility. Although I can't tell you exactly what we do, I can show you how it works. We found that in the simulator, before training and after training, we managed to reduce motion sickness by about 51%. We took that user trial and we did exactly the same thing on the road, and we found that on the road we managed to reduce motion sickness by 58%. So lots of really cool, promising work to be done in that area. To wrap up, self-driving cars will be taking the driver out of the role of the driver, but I think it's still a very important consideration that we consider the human factor within such vehicles. And if we want to enable sort of cool future like that, there's lots of really cool work to be done in human factors and integrating self-driving cars with people. So thank you very much indeed.